So it's all he can think about.
That's their strategy. Good strategy, kind of. But it failed big time because it just couldn't get certain shit out of my house, like my computer, or me, or Garfield. Or the Bible, or the Quran, or the Kala Chakra Tantra. Do I have some other books? Yeah, I do. Should I get it? I'll get it later. Because when I get that Bhagavad Gita, it's over with. I got the Orphic hymns on my side already. And the Buddhists completely. I keep telling you guys, you're on the edges of the center of the earth. Okay? Now, the true center is where the day switches. In the middle of the Pacific. Duh. The ocean, not the land. Which we treat like what? Shit, huh? We'll get them then. But after you've killed how many people, guys? We're hoping to kill and making this? About 7 billion at least. More like 8 billion. They're hoping to keep around about 225 million people. Most of them poor and struggling, seemingly. And definitely not the really magic people. They're hoping to get rid of all of us by killing us to death, which they have a few. And they're getting closer to some of them than you believe. No sleep. Where's my missionaries now?
Possible, no matter how dire the circumstances.
The Asha logos, the Scythian Empire. That's what I'm talking about. This kind of shit. We want to know who we are a little bit more. Can we, Taran? We can. You guys not yet?
Of their wisdom let Herodotus speak, and Dio, who calls them the wisest of mankind. Of their courage let their enemies tell, and we, their sons, who are here enjoying the countries which their swords won from the Romans, their civilized brethren, who had conquered all nations, yet yielded to them. Of their learning, when by circumstances they advanced in society in different countries, let the Greeks, their eldest progeny, who enjoyed their circumstances,
It's a weird one.
the
We need to
Romans
really just answer
next,
to a lot of questions.
and the modern Europeans,
And he
the
knows
last
it.
but
Sorry,
not the
Dad.
least of their
Not that
sons.
respectful.
End quote.
So anyway,
In this video, I hope to help prove what will strike many conventionally minded scholars as a bold claim, namely that the sprawling and powerful Gothic people family, who lie at or near the root of virtually all Western peoples and cultures, and represent Europe's royal line and most foundational building block, very likely stem directly from the, quote, genuine Scythian element, who in turn lies still closer to that root, and that these two groups were perhaps even essentially one and the same, as innumerable older histories clearly attest. It's important to make clear that I so consistently return to the ancient Scythian and this people family, not simply because they're a single branch of particular personal interest, but rather because I believe they best represent the core of that tree that produced countless branches of interest. I'd suggest they're also the best example of a particular culture of nobility and virtue, courage and principle, which we see represented throughout all of Europe's best and brightest eras and high points, especially in the knightly and chivalric orders, and a worldview and mindset and approach which was a hallmark of Western peoples, and often the most stark point of contrast with those who lay outside their sphere. I recently discovered Cassiodorus' collection of the letters and proclamations dictated to him by Theodoric the Great, and continually find myself coming back to them because they're so uniquely impressive. Quote, "Hear Theodoric, the Gothic king himself, dictating to his secretary Cassiodorus, and you hear the voice of such kings as render themselves gods to mankind. Favor justice, employ courage in the defense of innocence, that amid the crimes of other nations you may show the justice of the Goths. And do you imitate our Goths, whose courage in battle can only be equaled by their domestic modesty. And elsewhere, let the wars of other kings be crowned with the spoils and ruin of captured cities. It is our purpose, with the help of God, to conquer, that our subjects shall only grieve that they acquired our protection too late. And finally, this is the praise of the Goths, to preserve inviolate the natural laws of humanity." End quote. When we think of empires, we often think of strict, perhaps even tyrannical and brutal rule. Perhaps the harsh enslavement of all conquered peoples, or an enforcement of the adoption of a culture and language of the conquering element. Our modern understanding of Rome, especially a late and increasingly degenerate Rome, has helped shape the bulk of our understanding here. A Rome that gradually, especially toward her end, created a multiracial and multicultural stew of peoples in an ultimately failed attempt to increase her own power and reach and profitability. I'd suggest this is one of the foremost reasons we've had trouble recognizing the empire we're about to speak to as an empire. It's a big statement, but one I'm now confident in making. I'd suggest this hidden empire, this relatively subtle or loose-knit confederation of peoples, magnanimously governed and ruled by an aristocratic minority, may well be the most important and relevant empire in recorded history, with regard to its effects on the development of the history of Western mankind up until this very day, and certainly the most important, quote, empire that a great many of us have likely never heard of. It didn't just intertwine with Rome as she degraded and degenerated into oblivion in her final years, but its peoples anciently shared an immense overlap with most of the figures that build Rome in the first place. I'd suggest the same might be said of Greece, Persia, much of the Levant,
I don't care what Tim Miller says.
across long
I'm
stretches
gonna eat some food.
even of northwestern India, even, incredibly, China, Japan, and the Koreas, in the ruling and royal lineages of each. In this video, I'd like to state openly many of the things I've only hinted at in prior installments, both because I'm now confident enough in these conclusions, and because I think it's increasingly important that we do begin to state such things, clearly and openly. When we lose an understanding of our history and a clear vision as to where we come from and the generational journey we've taken, we lose so much of what it might seem at first glance. And in a very real sense, we lose a piece of ourselves. I believe this history lies
224
to the root of all Western peoples and cultures. And crucially, I've seen a great deal of evidence, whether conspiratorially driven or organic, it's difficult to say with 100% certainty that this history is being aggressively minimized, ignored, mischaracterized, and in many circles, outright lied about. I certainly don't think all of those individuals involved in this process are conscious deceivers, but I do sense a mysterious hidden hand helping push much of it along, and using immense money and power and influence to obfuscate and mislead, to essentially rewrite the record. In short, I'd suggest that World War II radically changed our cultural and scholarly trajectory in so many ways, and made simple and all-important terms like era that were once routinely used, practically verboten overnight, and made any comprehensive discussion of peoples like the Goths and their history and achievements virtually impossible in the environment of post-World War II academia. When I later came to realize the National Socialist Germans had shown great interest in the history of the Goths, this contrast began to make far more sense. But I think this studious ignorance has been disastrous in its net effects. I'm of the belief that history, if not relayed as truthfully and accurately as is possible, no matter where that truth might lie, isn't just harmed in the process, but becomes actively harmed.
It's still my thermos, and they know it.
Recasting history
Come on,
itself
Garfield.
to suit any political or ideological agenda seems
Sit
such
down.
a
No, stop being an asshole.
devastating and
Buckle in, dude.
step. As mentioned before,
What's up with you?
some misled academics may actually believe they have positive or justified reasons for tossing dirt on these findings and pointing in every other possible direction when it comes to speaking to our collective European heritage. In an age that's made equality and egalitarianism into a golden idol,
They project into his mind, otherwise they don't with me.
One that now
so I seem like a fool to you guys on camera.
Even the potential for innate differences in groups of mankind,
You too, Garfield.
past or present. The notion of an exceptionally successful and highly gifted subset of mankind, spreading and loosely ruling far and wide, would be a notion that such scholars would naturally aim to avoid, even destroy to the best of their ability. And frankly, I'm tired of hearing what I believe to be highly politicized history, if one can even call it history anymore, that aims to create a picture of what many muddied modern minds might wish to be true, as opposed to what seems to have so obviously actually transpired. If we are to take the bulk of our earliest histories and those penned up until the World Wars as our foremost values, there's such an incredible story still to be told here. And it's equally incredible just how little of it has. And how much of it seems to have been confined to shelves, dusty back corners, and even a feeling of lost food because, quote, misplaced, or lost under its disasters or destructions of libraries across the ages. Perhaps even sitting behind lock and key and blank and libraries, robbing us all of inevitable context. Much of the content of this video is going to be unfolded, yet similar to what occurred as I was creating the previous segment of history. I recently come across an engaging book that caused me to drop virtually every bonus and instead focus on its contents entirely. A work entitled An Inquiry into the History of Scotland by one John Pinkerton. Just a few quick notes on Mr. Pinkerton before we begin. He seems to have been a bit of a polymath, a multifaceted and multidisciplinary thinker in Scotland. From his youth, he was apparently drawn to and became immersed in the classics, and it's said that even in his earliest childhood years, he enjoyed translating Roman authors such as English. He was a Scottish antiquarian, cartographer, author, numismatist, historian, and to this day, his maps are acknowledged as some of the greatest of archaeology. And a great many historians drew from his work, and those were hidden. And of course, there was the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. We even acknowledge this importance to the specific work that would be most heavily cited, and we not consider. Pinkerton has been called eccentric by some, and this seems fair enough, and he was perhaps energetic and opinionated to the point of being a difficult man to deal with at times. those he thought were engaging in history writing in a slapdash and misleading way. The environment in which he offered his work should also be noted as well. Many leading Scottish and Irish thinkers of the day were attempting to fully understand their views, and there was a raging debate as to the definition of terms like Celtic or Germanic, and the degree to which the populations of both of these peoples were represented by the language. Pinkerton himself can occasionally speak harshly about the Celtic peoples, but it's crucial to understand that his particular research of Celtic is exclusively and narrowly defined as those groups of people who traveled the West and who were most goaded over in a seemingly corrupt and tyrannical sense by what seems to be a corrupted Druidic class that had most lost its way. And the worst examples of Druidic class almost tell me nature and word and deed, whose aims seem to exclusively be personal power and control of material bodies, and who seem to see these populations as more akin to cattle than free and capable men. It's important to note how difficult it is to separate the Germanic and Celtic elements because these were so often linked together and used as seen that the spectrum of the one to the other has no definitive dividing line. Many of the peoples we call Celtic wisdom were very obviously direct and fairly recent outgrowths of the Germanic people, ethnically, racially, genetically, and some of those we call Germanic have extremely strong Celtic influence, both ethnically and culturally. Both of these groups so obviously spring from a single root. To my mind, it's only a question of when that root is clear. But they certainly went on to develop slightly different characters and culture and history. And a large group of, quote, Celtic peoples, specifically those who made up the small pockets of, quote, indigenous populations of the furthest west, likely split from those peoples we consider archetypically Germanic at a very early date, perhaps as early as 1500 BC or before, but certainly by 500 BC, only to begin blending together once again in relatively modern times within modern Europe. So if Pinkerton does display a bias, it's here. He seems to want to communicate that the bulk of Scotland's roots lie in Germanic peoples with a history of far-flung travel
It's up a little bit.
as opposed to the
Go up to
quote, indigenous
Look like-
Celtic elements with a far more isolated and simple recorded history. And he almost seemed in a bit of an echo of his day, with a specific writer or two that were attempting to emphasize the purely Celtic elements.
Grab it back up. In case. Walking to our book closer now.
At what he seems to see as lazy and shoddy history on the part of some of these thinkers. One final note to reiterate the importance of this subject matter. This large family of peoples, appropriately called Germanic, we take germinate to be a root of this etymology, that they seemed to be a seed people from which a vast number of branches would spring over the past 4,000 years, and what little recorded history we still have absolutely should not be thought of as confined to Germany, or even exclusively Northwestern Europe, or even exclusively Europe. We quote Germanic peoples today simply represent a single, largely unmixed element of this larger family, much as Tacitus so clearly mentioned in his histories. If Pinkerton is correct, and if my own theories are correct, this group has a much more wide-ranging, almost all-pervasive history, due to covering an immense amount of land, sea, and seemingly having an ongoing cultural policy of regularly sending a significant portion of its young men whenever conditions started to become a bit crowded, and whenever great adventure was sought, into foreign territories and new shores, as pioneers, settlers, or even conquerors. Though it must be restated, this was absolutely not a group that sought to enslave and rule foreign populations in any heavy-handed or brutal way. Far from it. In fact, they seemed to want to maintain an arm's-length degree of separation. Their style of rule, or loose government or political structure, seems much more akin to the feudalism of earlier on. which of course makes perfect sense, as these traditions of yours spring directly from the same people, and to some degree represent practices that extend as far back as our own history. Think of a martial elite similar to the chivalric Viking, who on this cruise not conquered massive power to manage and take women, and merely asked for direct tribute offered protection from outside threats or roving bands of criminals who might otherwise seek to raid and make off with cattle or slaves, or even conquer outright if the opportunity presented. It's my belief that the less restrictive and invasive nature of this quote rule has caused this incredibly unique and powerful empire to be so overwhelmed by so many, so profound, especially minds who seem almost incapable of wrapping their head around what Rome and Greece as legitimate precedents they were by so many weren't the unilateral and exclusive epicenters of our own existence, but rather the almost surrounding accounts happen to emanate from their heavens, their specific perspectives. Yet, even here, one needs enough and reads closely the ancient connections already known. Ancient Greece, especially, speaks a great deal of the population phenomenon, and features them heavily in both the artwork and their stories of origins, their heroes, their myths, etc. Those academics that attempt to paint a firm dividing line between the Scythian, Goth, and Hellenic Greek, for example, are doing something of immense disservice. Yes, there were many cultural differences that belonged to our time, but these peoples can only truly be understood when we recognize their shared history, heritage, and ancestry. Just as the Scythians are spoken of as having the same or very closely related to approximate neighbors in the Hyperboreans, the ancient Greeks might be considered to have a somewhat similar relationship with their earliest Scythian neighbors. In a previous work, I highlighted Christopher Buckley's The Scythian Empire. The Scythians were not only massive alone, but covered truly vast distances, and were widely spread and unknown, essentially ruled or governed by loosely organized populations within those distances, and something of an empire. As the Scythians disappeared from history, magically and with little to no explanation according to modern scholarship, the Goths, equally suddenly, appeared in the same location known to be inhabited by Roman Scythians, and suddenly take the stage of world history. Apparently, if we're to believe the conventional modern academic theories, they've been quietly hiding until this moment. It's my view that none of this was magic, and that the Gothic people who became the foundational bedrock upon which so much of Europe is built, and the obvious root of the royal lines and lineages, are something of a continuation of the Scythian element, and seemed to be, to speak it frankly, the most formidable force on the world stage. To quote Pinkerton, the Scythians or Goths who slew Cyrus, whom Alexander shamed, and who were the terror of Pyrrhus, were, in their German states, equally formidable. Not the Samians, but Carthaginians, of the mingled nations of Spain and Gaul, and even the Parthians themselves, were so dangerous between them. Carbo, Cassius, Scarus Aurelius, Servilius Scipio, Marcus Manlius, with their 5 consular armies, were all taken prisoner or slain by Teutones and Hero, who had fled the Roman Germans. Julius declined the contest with the Germans. Augustus with the fate of Burrus and his legions. Parted with Drusus, Nero, and Germanicus, defended his frontier of Northern. This was the whole ambition. In later times, they were triumphed over, but not conquered. Under their ancient name of Scythi and others, they were soon, by degrees, to seize on the whole Western Empire, nay, to pour over the fertile coasts of Africa. The Vandali, whom Tacitus and Pliny found in the north of Germany, were to fight with Belisarius, who claimed to be the Suevi were to fragrant fields of Spain, the langobardo, which enjoy the orange groves of Italy, the angler and Tacitus placed in the list of names, were to give their name to a country eminent in arts and arms and wisdom and liberty. There's long been this academic and Hollywood tendency to paint the Germanic peoples as primitives, but this idea has never quite sat well and ever less so in our language. One of the foremost reasons is that it's difficult to imagine primitive people, so frequently besting a people considered to be vastly more advanced, often even when heavily outnumbered. It's always seemed to me that the surest measure of a nation and people's collective abilities is on the field in which it matters most, and the field that becomes most significant and necessary. This was absolutely the battlefield in the ancient world. Not just the rounds of weapon or armor or shield making, but of strategy, tactics, organization, and generalship, the structure of hierarchy and leadership, the degree of loyalty and devotion and morale built and experienced by the average soldier. All of these things, and so much more, intertwine to create a relatively objective measure of a people's merit and ability. And by this yardstick, it's always been difficult to reconcile the modern Hollywood version of these northern peoples being brutish and intimidating. Also, of course, there's the fact that we still have the descendants of these brave peoples among us today. And plucking the average Swede or Dutchman or Scotsman or Belgian off of the street, you're likely to find a relatively educated or intelligent or cultured human relative to the worldwide average. This idea that just a few generations ago they were all one-caked, illiterate savages seems offensively stupid, and to put it mildly, I'm not sure there's evidence to support it. If there is, I've not found it. Also, crucially, as Pinkerton so well puts it, quote, we look on the Goths as enemies of science, without once reflecting that wisdom is, at any time, superior to science, and that the Goths only despise the science prevalent in the decline of Rome, which was fallen and is regarded as such by us at present. This has always been precisely my feeling, and it's been gratifying to see it vindicated, or at least agreed with, by thinkers like Pinkerton. All, quote, science is not created equal. The straightforward realms of engineering and mathematics are timelessly valuable, as they make us measurably more powerful and capable, and so obviously help push us forward in a fruitful direction. Yet our modern gender or feminist studies, or intensive studies of equity or oppression, are all less so as subjects, and will be winced at or looked at with bemused wonder and confusion in generations to come. The former focuses on immutable truths and the laws of nature and the universe, and is the study of timeless truths that are obviously real and logical to all, whereas the latter represents something very different, and something far more superficial and ephemeral and merely political, a temporary cultural overlay masquerading as a branch of science, but in no way fitting the more pure and beautiful and healthy definition of the word. This isn't to say that the science the Goths or Scythians rejected or practiced to a lesser degree was the feminist studies or racial equality notions of the Romans. It's simply to make the point that some branches of, quote, science are far more fundamental and valuable than others. And to some degree, their objective value is made obvious in how much their study directly improves the lives and abilities of those who practice them. And it might even be said that nature herself is the best of all universes, and our attempts to so remove ourselves from her stage and confine ourselves to concrete buildings surrounded by fluorescent lighting, and esoteric professors, teachers, increasingly teaching our children why they should feel ashamed of themselves, has been a significant step backward in a very real sense. Wisdom is absolutely superior to the purely superficial intellect, just as timeless and foundational knowledge is vastly superior to much of the science
Spoiling those fucking demons.
of one specific age, as the one is far less liable to opening the door to error and misjudgment than the other.
So that fucking
And
evil.
This perspective ideally extends into our understanding of history. Pinkerton tells us, quote, the reader must also observe.
You have to include some of my children too, it turns out. Potential ones.
Opens a new field. Yet heaven forbid that I should
When you're that fucking open.
Hypothesis in ancient history. No, the truth is always old. What shall now be shown was originally well known, though afterward lost. I do not discover new opinions, but old facts that were hid under the soil of error. When they are dug up, they will be found to evidence their antiquity by their fabric. I greatly appreciate
electromagnetic, dude.
Here, the use of that term, fabric.
Trying to grow back? I can show you how to.
So
I'm trying to get there, in secret ways, mostly.
Those most capable of soaring above any one singular field.
So how ready for you are God?
Begin to tie all of their conclusions together.
Are the gods? How ready for you are the gods? That's what matters most. Turns out. In the kingdom of heaven, when they all show up, the legion of angels, and the chosen ones, all 144,000 of them or something like that. How ready for you
that don't agree with the broader
are they
seek to paint. Initially, I too rightfully trusted opinions, tossed out many of the works they suggested we had. But over the years, I couldn't help but realize how many of these works, across numerous different subjects, were saying the same things, and not drawing from the same sources, or from the same supposed mistakes, rather from independence. And that scarcely a single one of them supported unconventional theories or modern academia. Gradually, I realized that to believe modern conventional theories, we're forced to throw out not just one or two, or even just a large handful of words, accounts, and opinions, but hundreds. In many ways, nearly all of them. We're asked to believe that our ancestors were dishonest, ignorant, or misinformed, prideful to the degree that they'd simply invent stories out of whole cloth, and that somehow these supposedly false stories of the broader universe would magically dovetail and align almost perfectly with one another. I can't count the number of instances in which a people referred to as Scythian by one ancient author are then referred to as Gothic or as Germanic or some branch of the German by another author from a similar time. And this often even occurs within the same group, with a single author using these labels completely interchangeably, as if wanting to clarify that these were one people with different names. In any other case, with this many clear references tying these groups together and speaking to them as a singular entity, I feel it would be accepted as the most plain and obvious truth. But in this one unique case, modern academics seem absolutely devoted to making the opposite case, seeming and reconnaissance. Yet, even still, having read virtually every one of the major arguments in the world, I've yet to see any genuinely compelling evidence to support their speculative contention, let alone anything definitive or concrete. And it's such a weighty claim to make, one that completely severs Western mankind from its history and achievements to the East, and leaves the Germanic peoples essentially without any history whatsoever prior to approximately 200 to 300 AD, with blank slate and massively unquestionable. That to make such claims in disagreement with the majority of surviving historical accounts, in my opinion, demands some clear and concise evidence and arguments. In his work, Pinkerton makes three, quote, grand arguments to show the connection between Scythian and Gothic, in making the case that the two were essentially related. Firstly, language. Quote, the learned and judicious Sherman observes that there are three ways to judge the origins of nations. Number one, from the relation of speech. Number two, from accounts preserved from ancient history. Number three, from similar manners. But that the first is the chief and most certain argument. This is indeed common sense, for if we found a people in Japan who spoke French, it must be of French origin, and it is one of these truths which Language is a most permanent matter, and not even total revolutions in nations can change it. The philosopher well told us this, and it was not in his power to make one word a citizen of man. When a speech changes, it is in many centuries, and it only changes clothes, not body and soul. It can be proved that the language of the old Germans was specific, though it has infallibly not shown to be a these following facts. The consonants of these civic rules with the old German is universally known. The Frankic is a dialect of the Teutonic. Yes, the old German. The Gospels of the Epictetus bear such affinity to Frankic, of which fragments are preserved in the early French historians, that Delacroix and Marcialis have pronounced these Gospels to be part of an old Frankic version, though Lai, Plato, and others have refuted that argument and a comparison of the dialects. Schilcher, in his invaluable thesaurus, has given us many large monuments to this in the old German, in the 7th century language, and it is clear that the old Scythic of the French is the same language. Doctors, learned glossary of the ancient German, also surpass this point, and being skillful either, after hesitating whether the Gospels of Orpheus bear most resemblance to the German or Scandinavian dialect of the time, gives it in favor of the former, adding that some words that might be explained, that may be found in the old German or Scandinavian. The Anglo-Saxon is explained, which should be styled the Anglo-Belgian, is also known to be a venerable and excellent dialect of the Toulouse, and bears such intimate connection to the secret Gospels that the number one provider on Dictionarium Saxonitum, practical Latin, is built forward on the word. The Scandinavian, of which the oldest relics are in Iceland, which began with Arius in the 19th century, is a dialect of the German. The remains we have were more modern by 4 centuries than those of the German, though nothing should be built on the agreement descriptions. And those Icelandic relics are more polished, and the words more shortened, and grain of mud are polished, and its long words are in really pink. Not only because more modern than the German, but because the Icelandic was refined by a long succession of poets and historians, almost worthy of Greece and Rome. Hence, the Icelandic, being a more polished language than the German, has less affinity with the apparent dialect. The Swedish is nearer related to Icelandic than either the Danish or Norwegian, the two latter countries being under one monarch of German history, and from the proximity of the German and the world's perspective. But that the Swedish is the daughter of the Scythic, like Orpheus, is amply known from years from the glossary Swedish and Walfrid Strader, who wrote under Louis the Pious in the Old German about 820, observes justly, the Goths, who were also called Pratani, had our language, that is the Tudesque. This fact, Walfrid must have seen from the translation of Scripture by Orpheus, mentioned by the ecclesiastic historians, and famous from the first for the whole Christian. The modern German, language spoken in far greater extent than any other language, and now beginning to be much studied in the modern books, resembles the Gothic language, more than the present Danish, Norwegian, or Swedish, and has certainly one ancient standing. Its likeness to the Asiatic tongues, and harshness and inflexible thickness of sound, is very apparent. And form, structure, and numerous words that agree to the Persian is all. Eusebius shows that the crowns of French women, not Tartars but the remains of the Scythic, speak the language of German. On to the second argument, and that of historical sources. Pinkerton states that the ancients didn't have an exhaustive or comprehensive knowledge, but did seem to know a handful of things with certainty. One, that the Celts were in the west of Europe, above Spain, or in Gaul and Gaul. Number two, that in the northwest of Europe, or in present Germany and Scandinavia, were the Scythic, the Celtic-Scythic, or those Scythi of Gaul and Britain, who bordered on France, as the Indo-Scythi did on the Indians. Number three, that the Sarmati were on the north of Greece, to the east of the Scythic Germans. clearly appear from the following photos. Herodotus places the Celts quite to the west, in the pillars of Hercules, whereas in his geography of Scythia, he evidently supposes that the Scythians spread all over the northeast of Europe, even to the northern ocean. The Anaclersi and Bologna, he ranks among the Scythian nations who are united into a general group of areas. Now, Dionysius and Ptolemy place the Anaclersi and Bologna upon the Baltic Sea. We learn from this that the ancient Greeks knew that the Scythia extended to the utmost northwest extremity of Europe, up to Scandinavia. Number 2. Xenophon, who wrote about 380 years before Christ, in his Memorabilis and Preface, says, in Europe, the Scythian tribes showing that as the Persians were the ruling people in Asia, so were the Scythians in Europe. That the Scythians of Europe were regarded by Xenophon as confined to ancient Scythia, he could not have given them this description. We palpably understand that they extended in the heart and furthest parts of Europe, and there were universal strength and power. Aristotle says the Ister or Danube flowed from the Pyrenees, the mountains of Turkey. He speaks of the coal of Scythia and adds that the country of the Celts, above Spain, was also coal. He, as well as Herodotus, knew that the Celts were confined to the country, to Britain, but he calls the tin that was brought from Britain Celtic tin. Quote, they say that Celtic tin melts much sooner than Europe. In the next century, or about 250 years before Christ, Hippias, Xenophon, and others, authors quoted by Pliny on his Naturals, speak of the Prussian coast in which Amber is found, saying it lay opposite the Scythia, distant a day or two sail. Pliny quotes them separately and Bulgarian separately, but all agree on this. It shows to a certainty that the Greeks knew the Scythians to extend to Scandinavia, over all the north of Germany. Procopius, too, seemed to clearly recognize the event. Quote, to him who passes straight there is Moses, and its mouth, on the shore anciently dwelled the gods, that Atraxia, which is mentioned. And at a great distance were placed the Goths, Visigoths, Vandals, and all other Gothic nations, who were also called Scythians in ancient times, since all the nations in these parts were in common called Scythia. And finally, on to the third round. The Germans were survived from similar marriage. Pinkerton tells us Herodotus, in his fourth book, chapter 59 to 82, gives us a long account of the anatomy of Scythia, and a peculiar happiness seems to attend this favorite nation, as Tacitus has described those of the descendants of the Romans, so that the clearest splendor is found. To run a parallel with Swan's essay to a vast size, and they are so like that they need no longer approach. Romans, and all of northern Russia have remarked that the description given of the Scythia by Herodotus applies perfectly to the Goths of Russia, even down to a late age. The chief difference arises merely from a local circumstance. It is that the ancient Scythia of the Euxine, described by Herodotus, had found their fine breed of Persian horse thrive equally well in their pillar positions on the temperate shores of the Euxine, while in Germany and Scandinavia, the cold was then too severe for their settlements, and the indigenous breed was, as Tacitus states, very small. Hence, the ancient Scythia were chiefly cattle, while the Germans and Scandinavians had little or no cattle. This difference was a necessary effect of climate, and offers no distinction in the people, any more than the different rifles by the British and the East Indies, on local use here, destroys the identity of that people. In Iceland, the Norwegians differed prodigiously in their clothes in Normandy and Montreal and Sicily. But to instance a few particulars with similar Scythia and Germans. Firstly, domestically, both Scythia and Germans lived by hunting, pasturage, and both had few agricultural options, but they tilled their land as they pastored, belonged to the community, and they quitted it at the age to move to another. Herodotus observes that the Scythians, did not use the corn for food, partially
Garfield's powerful too. He does most of the work, I believe.
Such as
I don't feel like I do much.
back the Persian Empire, where the Goths were running low. The Scots, in their Declaration of Honor, speak to their Scythian heritage. The Irish speak of the Scythian Latus as their